So Professor Qafisheh will talk about Israel's trial from legal perspective, and he has 15 minutes. Professor Qafisheh, floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much for inviting me for this event, and I thank the audience, and I'm proud to be with you. My talk will be divided into two parts. First, I will talk about the case, the genocide case that South Africa brought against Israel to the International Court of Justice, and the second part will be dedicated to the impact of the Gaza war and the decision of the International Court of Justice on the international discourse and international law in general. So let me say first that this decision of the International Court of Justice that was delivered on the 26th of January regarding the genocide that is taking place in Gaza right now is a historical decision, because it is the first time in history such type of genocide is taking place in an unprecedented way. Until now, we have about 100,000 Palestinians martyrs, about 30,000 who were murdered by the Israeli forces, and more than 70,000 Palestinians who injured by Israeli forces. That is about 5% of the entire population of the Gaza Strip. So if we can imagine the scale of murder and destruction in Gaza, if we take a country that has 100 million people, it will be about 4 to 5 million people who would be killed in such comparative scenario. Of course, in addition to the destruction of more than 80% of the buildings in Gaza, the destruction of hospitals, deliberately targeting hospitals, and as I speak now, the Israeli forces are invading the Nasser hospital in Khan Yunis. So it is probably the first time since the Second World War hospitals are directly targeted by military forces. Of course, in addition to the destruction of schools, universities, municipalities, courts, bar association, and all facets of life. So if we take, for example, the 5 cases of genocide that has been pleaded before the International Court of Justice, this would be probably the highest number of casualties and mass destruction in comparison with the other cases, taking Bosnia case, the Croatia case, the Myanmar case, and the case of Gaza. So, but this decision is really historical, because also it is the first time that Israel is brought to the International Court of Justice and charged by genocide. Nobody would have imagined, when the Genocide Convention was crafted in 1948, that Israel, for which the Genocide Convention was drafted after the Holocaust, will be itself charged by committing a Holocaust for or against another people. So it was a bit shocking. But also, what is also significant is the anonymous decision by the majority of the judges in the court. Actually, before the decision, nobody expected that the court will decide with this big majority against Israel. We have 15, or in one or two orders, 16 judges were saying that the genocide in Gaza is plausible. That means that there are serious indications, clear indications, that genocide is taking place in Gaza. Why we are saying that we were not expecting that this high number of judges will decide that there is genocide? Because of the composition of the court. Actually, the composition of the court is not actually promising, because we have judges from the United States, Germany, Slovakia, India, Australia, Uganda, and most of these countries are their policies are pro-Israel. But I think it was overwhelming for the judges to decide that there is genocide in Gaza, because the facts are speaking for themselves. So, and I think also this judgment will have far-reaching impact and results on other aspects of international law, including international criminal law. I expect and I hope that the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, Mr. Karim Khan, will take action in the near future to bring charges against the officials who are committing this type of crime, the crime of genocide, which is the crime of the crimes, which consists of a series of war crimes. And this genocide is committed by individuals, Israeli officials, who declared publicly that they are going to erase Gaza and level Gaza and commit actions which are genocidal in character. In addition, of course, to the intention that was declared by Israeli Minister of Defense, Israeli Prime Minister, and a number of other cabinet ministers. But of course, I know that some people were a bit disappointed by the judgment because the court did not declare the end of the ceasefire. And here we should be a little bit clear. I know that there are different opinions on this in this respect, but I think the essence of the court order is to apply to enforce ceasefire in Gaza, because the court ordered the cessation of genocidal acts, to open the crossings for Gaza for humanitarian aid, in addition to stop all incitement against for genocide. All these measures will not be possible to implement without a genuine ceasefire. So, in effect, the court order is to cease the hostilities and cease fire, to stop fighting in Gaza. But again, some people were hoping that the court will order the ceasefire directly, but I think that was not, because given the composition of the court, that would have been a little bit difficult, as indicated by the German judge in the court. He said that the court would not decide on other general international law issues, including the issue of self-defense, ceasefire, self-determination, the application of international humanitarian law. And probably because of that division within the court decided to take this action in this way. But also the order is very clear and impose obligations on Israel, and I think also erga omnes, what we call in international law erga omnes obligations in all states to take actions in order to stop genocide in Gaza based on the Genocide Convention. We have 153 states member to the Genocide Convention, and I think all of them, they have so-called erga omnes parties obligations to stop genocide and to challenge the Israeli and take action against the Israeli genocidal acts in Gaza. Finally, on this in this aspect, I think this decision will have also impact on the other decision that we are expecting from the International Court of Justice. Next week, on the 19th of February, the court will conduct a hearing from the 19th to the 26th of February, regarding the legality of the Israeli occupation. And I think 52 states and 3 international organizations will be speaking at the court. And I think the court will, this decision of the genocide will have impact regarding or on the legality or illegality of the Israeli occupation, because occupation, racial discrimination, apartheid, colonial domination are the very foundations for genocide. So this is my first aspect, and I think the other aspect of this is the impact of this decision on international law generally. Just this afternoon, one of my students came to my office, and she asked me, frankly, Professor, I want to ask you, do you still believe in international law? Do you think international law is applicable in our region? Do you think international law is useful in the case of Palestine? And this decision is repeated over and over again by many people in the general public, journalists, and other international law specialists. But I think international law is very important and significant for us, the Palestinians, and indeed for all those who are living under oppression, because international law is the tool for us to claim our rights and to continue claiming our rights. And I think giving up from international law, or not calling for the implementation and enforcement of international law, will be a gift for those who abuse international law. International law is the tool for the Palestinians to say that the Israeli occupation is illegal, the illegality of the Israeli settlements, the illegality of Israeli annexation of East Jerusalem, the illegality of Israeli confiscation of Palestinian land, water, resources, the right of return for Palestinian refugees is based on international law, and international law and international criminal court in particular is the tool by which the Palestinians can bring or can claim that the court have the duty to investigate and punish those who are committing the crimes in Palestine.
Professor Arian will talk about the political aspect of the Israel trial. Floor is yours, please.
A lot of people try to frame this issue like this is a war that just started on October the 7th. It's like Palestinian aggression against a peaceful state in its 75th year of existence. And of course, this is far from reality and the truth. The fact of the matter is that what happened in Palestine, what happened on October the 7th, is an accumulation of an aggression that has been taking place for over a century by the Zionist movement. Zionist movement is a movement that started towards the end of the 19th century with the specific goal of replacing people with another people. Zionism is a colonial settler movement with the goal of using whatever means available to them, including aggressiveness, aggression, including ethnic cleansing, including any crime that you can think of, with all means possible. And that has been protected mainly by Western, European, and American states throughout the history of Zionism. Zionism depends on its existence, first on the fact that it has to be allied with an imperialist power. It started with, at the beginning, it was offering itself to different European powers until Britain embraced it. And they had the Balfour Declaration in 1917 because it was serving a strategic interest for Britain, as well as to try to further the goal of the Zionist movement in trying to establish a Jewish homeland for Jewish communities. It started as a problem, a Jewish problem in Europe, which had nothing to do with the Arabs or the Muslims. And Britain found that they could actually solve two problems with one: solve the Jewish problem in Europe, but also solve the Eastern problem, where whenever they were trying to put down the states, the Muslim states at that time, the threat was the Ottoman threat, but throughout history there was always a problem in that region. So this could also be a solution to that by implanting a foreign body in the midst and making sure it's fragmented and divided, as we have seen in the Sykes-Picot Accords. At any rate, the point I'm trying to make, my first point, is that the Zionist movement is a creation of the West in order to put down any kind of a renaissance or any kind of a challenge to Western hegemony. And the second thing that the Zionist movement depended on is this sense of victimization. And when we talk about victimization, they bring all kinds of the history of persecution and abuse that existed in Europe, which mainly was by Christians, European Christians, persecuting their own Jewish population. So it's not a phenomena that existed within the body politics of the Muslim states. And of course, it culminated in the pogroms at the end of the 19th century, and then in the Holocaust in the middle of the 20th century. And they seized on that and trying to bring all the support, particularly again from European states and then from the United States. So this is very important to understand, because imperialism and Zionism are tied at the hip. They present themselves as the exceptionalism, the American exceptionalism and the European exceptionalism, and now the Israeli exceptionalism. So they are above the law. They can do whatever it takes, whatever they want, whatever they need in order to attain their goals. And you could see this very vividly in how Israel, throughout its history, from 1948, these massacres did not start after October 7th. The Palestinian people have been suffering from Israeli aggression and Israeli genocide and Israeli ethnic cleansing and Israeli crimes against humanity even long before the war itself started, or the Nakba started in 48. But of course, what we see now is a vivid example of what the Palestinians had to endure throughout. And the world is awakened now to the real aim and to the real tactics that the Zionists use. And that brings the third principle, or the third pillar that Zionism depends on, which is the dehumanization of their victims. We have seen throughout history, throughout the relationship, throughout the occupation for the past 76 years or so, including obviously since 1967, how Israel and its supporters dehumanized their victims, dehumanized the Palestinians. And we have seen what kind of language they use, human animals, and of course, human animals, you can kill animals. You don't, your conscience is not going to be affected by that. They are not humans to be cared for. With these three elements that Israel uses, we have seen that these have been basically the immunity that it has used throughout that struggle to get away with many crimes. All of you, I believe, in this room were not born in '82. I'm sure after that. So you haven't seen, I have. In 1982, for 77 days, Israel was bombarding Lebanon daily for 77 days. They killed about 17,000, which people were very surprised. The difference, of course, is that people would see this. I was living in the United States at the time. We would see it in the news, maybe the first or second item in the news, on the 6:30 news, and people would forget about it the rest of the day. But what we see today is the continuous bombardment of the Palestinians day in and day out, 24/7. That's a phenomena that Israel has not used to. That they are in the limelight where people see their crimes vividly, not filtered through some kind of a media, some kind of news organizations that they choose what they want to tell the people the story. Today, everybody's seeing the story. Everybody's seeing the kids that are being killed, the kids that are being slaughtered, the buildings that are being bombarded, the hospitals, the mosques, the churches, the schools, the universities, the bakeries, the shopping malls, the residences. You have seen this, and you have seen thousands of people being killed. This is a phenomena that Israel is not used to, and people are not oblivious now they cannot just look the other way, even though governments, we have seen governments trying to justify Israel has the right to defend itself. Israel has the right to attack, and that is no longer working with their populations that are seeing this, and it's not just for a day or two, it's been going on now for 131 days continuously. So that's a new thing. And of course, the question is, why South Africa? No other country came forward. That's one of the questions that the organizers were asking. And of course, it's very important because South Africa is a symbol. South African struggle, which existed also for decades and culminated in the 1980s until Nelson Mandela was freed in 90. And then he was elected president in 94. This is very important because South Africa is the symbol of oppressive, imperialist mentality, imperialist philosophy, racist philosophy. So for South Africa to bring this to the fore, to bring this to the attention of the world is very significant. Indeed, no other country was willing to do it, including Muslim countries. 57 Muslim countries came together on November 11th, almost 5 weeks, 35 days after the war started, after the aggression started. 57 countries have 5 million soldiers, 5,500 airplanes, 22,000 tanks, thousands and thousands of artillery. They spent on defense $1 trillion in the past 10 years. Yet, all what they came up with is that the Palestinians the aid must get to the Palestinians. And all these countries with all these facilities, they couldn't bring one bottle of water unless the Israelis said yes. That tells you that we in the Muslim world, we're not free, we're not independent. We're really not just weak, but our will is been thwarted, and the one that has the real hegemony, the real power, the ones who can actually dictate and they have the hegemony are the Israelis, supported of course by the United States, which is the superpower. So that's the reality, that we are weak. Yeah, you have one country who doesn't have any kind of power to impose. It brought this to the fore. It brought this to the International Court of Justice. Now, a lot of people didn't know what that means. And as the professor says, that it is indeed very important, because for the first time, political implication, for the first time, Israel is brought under scrutiny. Israel is being not held to account because the International Court of Justice does not have the power to impose its ruling eventually. But it brings to the attention of the world this notion of a genocide. Genocide is a very serious crime. It's a crime that in international law that came right after World War II, and it came by Jewish scholars, in which what happened to the Jews during World War II should not be repeated. So they invented, or at least they came up with this concept, that an ethnic group, a religious group, a special group could be targeted for who they are. And they could be targeted with the worst kind of atrocities taking place against them. And therefore, those who commit these atrocities must be held to account, must be accountable to what they've done. But as I said, because they think of themselves exceptional, that they're the chosen people, no one can come close to them, they thought they are immune from these kind of accountability, from these kind of charges. Yet they came, and South Africa presented an impeccable case. Anyone who would read these 84 pages, they wrote the charges against them in a way that it's very difficult to deny what happened. Of course, we're seeing it, but they brought him because the question of intention was a question that is very difficult to prove, but because they felt immune, it was all over the place, by the president, by the prime minister, by the different ministers, by the army, by the media, by the soldiers. Everybody was talking about it. So it was very difficult to deny. And a lot of people say this is a political case as well as it's a legal case. And therefore, because many of the countries on that court actually were supportive of the Israeli genocide, that the people who are representing these countries would probably try to sway or not be forthcoming or not rule in a way that would be in favor of the Palestinians. Yet, that case showed that 14 out of the 15 judges who sit on that court actually accepted South African case. South Africa asked for 9 demands. They came with 6, but actually almost all 9 were implied in this. Israel asked for 3 demands. They asked to dismiss the case. They asked to take the case away, to postpone it because there is no direct dispute between South Africa and Israel. The court rejected all the demands of Israel, and it accepted the demands of South Africa. But we have to remember that South Africa did not ask for a ceasefire. Ceasefire is a term used between states. And what's happening in Gaza is not between states. Hamas is not a state. Hamas is not a state or even signatory to this. Hamas is a group, but it's with this group, Israel is trying to achieve what it couldn't achieve back in '48, which is the complete expulsion of Palestinians from Palestine. It found that this is a perfect time to complete what hasn't been completed in '48. So let's kick the Palestinians out, or at least deter them that they will never ever try to resist again in the future. So that was the real intent here. And Palestinians to them is just a convenient vessel by which they would like to accomplish their goals. So the government, the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, came with these 6 rulings in which effectively it says you cannot exterminate the Palestinians. You cannot commit genocide on the Palestinians. Your army cannot commit genocide. You have to keep records of all the things that are taking place in Gaza. You will be responsible for that as the committing party. You cannot incite against the Palestinians. You must open all doors to help the Palestinians and get all the aids needed to the Palestinians. And the last one, that they have to also present a report. They have to give a full report of what's taking place. Now, what was the response of Israel? Totally ignored it. Today, we have almost 30,000 victims and about 8,000 unaccounted for under the rubble somewhere, and almost 67 or 7,000 injured, so almost 100,000 victims. And since that report came 3 weeks ago, tomorrow it will be 3 weeks ago, they have 1 more week and 2 days to report, and I don't think they're gonna report or they're gonna say something dumb, but that shows that this has never stopped, because the average has been 150 to 200 victims a day, plus almost double that with injured people. So the political implication is very important, because those who help Israel to commit its genocide, according to the Genocide Convention, is as guilty as the one who commits genocide. That means the United States is also implicated. That's why they're trying to change the scene, try to do something to stop this before the clock runs out in about 10 days. And of course, that is going to be very difficult, because there are a lot of politics going on, which I don't have time to go explaining, because Netanyahu himself could probably even go to prison, not because he's a genocidal, but because he is a corrupt politician in Israel. So that's why he's trying to prolong the war and trying to get some kind of a victory that he hasn't been able to get so far. So just to summarize, tell me if I have more time, or
actually no time.
I'm out of time.
Yeah.
So let me just conclude by saying there are many important implications of this. First of all, this is the first time that Israel is facing the music, is facing an international body that is going to say it is guilty of genocide. Unfortunately, the wheel of justice is very slow. It's going to take probably 2 years before they determine that. But in that ruling, it says that there are a plausible case of genocide. That by itself puts it into the light that it is committing genocide. And of course, everybody is saying this. Secondly, those who help Israel to commit, they are themselves implicated, and that's very important. Third, anyone who will prevent genocide is justified. So when the Houthis say you cannot have Israeli shipping, they are justified by international law to stop this. No one can say they are trying to disrupt international trade. That is nonsense. What the US is doing and Britain and others are nonsense. Fourth, if Turkey was waiting, for example, as a powerful country, regional country, it was waiting for someone to help. They said, we don't want to move alone. We want to have other countries with that. Now it can. It is armed by international law. It can actually go and help the Gazans. Not necessarily stop the genocide, but at least give them the aid that they deserve. Give them the medicine, give them the food, give them the water, give them the electricity. They can do that armed by international law, because in that ruling it says that all aid must reach the Palestinians, and whoever prevents that aid, meaning Israel, you can force that. So they would be armed by international law. What is missing here is the political will, because the US, as a country, as a state, as a government that is basically controlling the international order that it created, everybody is afraid of the US. And I say, if governments are afraid, it is then the people who have to move and force their governments to do the right thing, including here in Turkey. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have questions from here.
Hi, I'm Mariam. Okay, my question will be about the authority that the sanctions or anything that will be implied by the ICJ. Okay, so from a political realistic perception, I can say that I don't see what we expect from ICJ. I know they can decide or they can declare that the actions of Israel are illegal, though what will it change? They can put sanctions, though how they will imply it, how they will ensure that they will be followed. United States can still ignore them, or the countries that are supportive of Israel. So I wonder what power ICJ holds in their hand and what sanctions they may imply for the countries they are they have illegal acts.
Well, ICJ cannot impose, they can ask for ceasefire, they can ask for the cessation of hostilities, they can ask for Israel to stop, they can ask for Israeli withdrawal, but they cannot force it because they don't have an army. Back in 2004, the ICJ says that the wall that Israel is building around is illegal and it must be destroyed. Nothing happened because there is no power that can come and bring it down. But this is what could happen. Let's say ICJ already said they're going to get a report in about 10 days and they can rule that what's happening inside Gaza is wrong and that Israel must cease its aggression, it must withdraw from Gaza. They can ask these things. Would it happen? No. So what happens? Then countries could go to the Security Council, which will probably be vetoed by the United States. Then they can go to the General Assembly. Well, there are a lot of things they can pass in the General Assembly. Number one, they can suspend Israel's membership, which will make it isolated. They can basically place sanctions on Israel. Said anybody who would trade with Israel is a violator of international law. They can do that. They can accept Palestine as a state. They have the power to do that. There are many things that they could do. They can say anybody, a country or a combination of countries that come together and try to resist that occupation, they would be free to do so. So you can put a lot of things within. The question is never what should be done. The question is there the political will to do it. A lot of says, what can Turkey do? What can Saudi Arabia do? What can Kuwait do? What can, Egypt do? All these countries, they can do a lot. They can actually stop it tomorrow. If a combination of countries, let's say those who are oil-producing countries, they decide to stop producing 10% this week of oil. What happens? Because oil is an international commodity. What's going to happen to the price of oil? It's going to increase, right? At least $10 to $15. The following week, nothing happens, 20%, 30%. By the fourth or fifth week, what do you think is going to happen? There will be a lot of pressure because the economy of the world will collapse. But they don't have the political will to do that. What happens if a country like Turkey decides to, I wouldn't say, they have 40% of Israeli oil comes through Turkey. Did you know that? How many people knew this fact? okay, a couple of people. 40% of Israel's oil that is using in bombing the Palestinians today comes through Turkey. Can Turkey stop it? Of course it can. If not 40%, 20%, 10%. But there is no political will. Why? Because Turkey will pay a price. So the countries so far haven't been willing to pay that price because the US has a lot of leverage over all of them. But if the people in Turkey demands it and becomes a popular demand, the government cannot ignore it for long. And that's true across the board. If we really truly don't want the genocide taking place, there is a lot to be done.
Okay, thank you for your answer. We have another question. Sorry for that. Professor Qafisheh, could you keep talking right now?
Yes, how is it now? Do you hear me now? Is it better?
Okay, before the question, you have actually 5 minutes left. You can continue your presentation, and then we will go back to Q&A session.
Okay, the rest of my presentation is regarding the impact of October 7th on international law generally, and particularly the impact of the ICJ decision on international law in general. And these are based on the questions that you asked me in advance. So I think, you know, international law before October 7th is different from international law in October, after October 7th. So before and after. Why? Because what happened after October 7th showed very clearly the hypocrisy, the international hypocrisy, or the Western hypocrisy in dealing international law. How they approach international law in the case of Ukraine and the case of Palestine. Those who crafted international law, particularly international human rights law, international humanitarian law, are the very violators of international law, because they are not only preventing or not trying to prevent, but they are even complicit, and they are supporting Israel in violating international law. Imagine a country like Germany. They punish anyone, especially after in October and November, anyone who call for ceasefire. So if you are calling for peace and ceasefire, you will be charged by the German police. What hypocrisy would be more than that? And I think in general, international law is undergoing, I think, historical transformation. Even before October 7th, we could see that certain powers in the world are trying to find a more just international order, international law that would be enforceable. We could see that in Ukraine, in China, in the so-called BRICS countries, who are trying to find an alternative to the international security order that was created after the Second World War, whereby the colonizers, the Western colonizers, are dominating the international order and including international law. So I think powerful countries like China, Russia, Brazil, South Africa, also Turkey and Iran, and probably Saudi Arabia could work. And I think in the coming years we will witness certain transformation of the international order. And I think the Western countries they are aware of this fact, and they know that the Western civilization, especially the American hegemony, is declining, and they are trying to resist this fact from happening. But I think what happened in October 7th will accelerate that process, the decline of the Western hegemony and colonization of international law towards more just international law and international order. So what about Palestine? Where Palestine lies in this process? And I think what happened after October 7th and the Israeli genocide in Gaza made it clear the difference between theory the theory of international law as manifested in international organizations, international treaties, and the reality of international law. And I think this would be an opportunity. Of course, it's a difficult moment for the Palestinians and for Gaza, but that might contribute to put more pressure on international organizations, including the United Nations, to recognize the state of Palestine, to recognize the rights of Palestinians, to end the Israeli occupation, and probably the next decision of the International Court of Justice regarding the legality or illegality of Israeli occupation might impose certain obligations on all states in the world to contribute to putting an end to the Israeli occupation by the actions that mentioned by Dr. Arian, for example, imposing certain sanctions, including diplomatic sanctions, commercial boycott, to grant Palestine a full membership in the United Nations, to recognize, in effect, not only in words, the right of the Palestinians to self-determination, including the right of Palestinian refugees and the liberation of Palestine from the Israeli colonization. So this is a general thoughts about the impact of October 7th and the decision of the ICJ on the international legal order in general. So I think Palestine and Gaza will be the stone upon which international law will be tested and be clearer toward more just international order. I could see this. I think international law is changing, and the international justice and more actors or other actors will contribute to the new international order, including many of the countries in the south of the world.
Okay, thank you for your presentation, Professor Qafisheh. We have a question here. Do you have a question to whom? Arian, okay.
Thank you for your speech. So I don't know much about how the ICJ actually rules. I was wondering, does it rule? Can it differentiate between war crimes and genocide, and then say such and such amounts to war crimes but not to a genocide? And then in parallel to that, I was wondering, the cases against corruption cases against Netanyahu, can they be actually a strategic plan on the part of Israel? And at the end of this, can they say, okay, in parallel to the decision, let's say if there is a decision for war crimes, and those war crimes were committed by the corrupt Netanyahu, not by Israel. Do you think I mean, I'm just worried about this possibility, because I know that to actually argue for a genocide is very difficult, and I'm really worried. I know this is a very kind of a dystopic kind of scenario, but this is my concern. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know.
This is a legal question, so I will give you my answer. Maybe Professor Qafisheh also can add his 2 cents to this. First of all, war crimes are easier to determine than a genocide. But because the problem with genocide is not the act, you also have to give the intention. It's called mens rea in American law. You have to prove that these people intended for that to happen. But they gave so much evidence that the court could not ignore. But that's not really related to the corruption charges with Netanyahu. These existed for years, even before he was ousted from office and then came back from office. Now he's trying to change the political system in Israel in order to escape this. But it really has nothing to do with any of that. And it's not about, yes, he's trying to escape, but that has nothing to do with this. Because at the end of the day, to prove genocide or to rule for a genocide, it's going to take several years, perhaps 2 or 3 years. God knows where he's going to be during that time. But the charge of genocide is going to be both collective, meaning the country and the government, as well as individuals, but that will take time. So in terms of, can the ICJ come and say Israel committed genocide? Absolutely, it would come and say that. Could it come and say that these people were part of that genocide as rulers of Israel? Of course it can also. But as the professor said, there is an ICJ and ICC, which is the International Criminal Court. That's different from the ICJ. These are two different entities. The ICC could actually charge people with crimes, including the crime of genocide, including war crimes, including crimes against humanity. The problem is not the court, it's the person who is empowered by the court, who is very compromised. His name is Karim Khan. This person has been resisting for years to bring any crime against Israel. God knows what his real motivation is, and now he's been dragging his feet. There is a whole movement now to actually bring him down and bring someone who's more honest to actually bring these charges against those who are taken. But that also will take years to prosecute. So it's both legal as well as political. But just to conclude, there is no real connection between the corruption charges that Netanyahu is facing inside his country and what Israel is committing today. We don't need to actually bring them together. But he's using the war in order to escape not the possible, but the most the probable possibility of going to prison inside that country.
Professor Qafisheh, would you like to answer this question?
Yes, I think the crime of genocide is the gravest crime at international law, and it is composed of a series of war crimes and the crimes against humanity. So even if the court, in the worst case scenario, that decides after several years that there is no genocide in Gaza, but still there are so many war crimes that took place in Gaza, and in this case, those perpetrators of these war crimes, I think, and I'm sure, will be at least some of them will be referred to international criminal court, as was the case of Bosnia and Croatia. In both cases, the ICJ referred some of the war criminals in former Yugoslavia and in Serbia, referred them to the former court for Yugoslavia, and it named several of them, and it said that there is, although there is no genocide in Bosnia in general, with the exception of Srebrenica, but still there are series of war crimes that committed by these military and political personnel in both against Bosnia and against Croatia. In addition to that, Palestine, this case now at the ICJ is still at the provisional measure, which is temporary case, but that will be followed by the general case, by which Palestine can also intervene in the case. Of course, Palestine and other countries, and I think at least 10 countries they now declared that they would intervene in that case. And Palestine alone can request the court not only to refer the individuals who are charged of committing genocide to the International Criminal Court, but also to ask a request for reparation, the reconstruction, rebuilding of Gaza, the return of the Palestinians to their homes, compensation against the losses, material and personal losses will be estimated in billions of dollars. And I think if Palestine uses this, the state of Palestine uses this smartly, the court, I think, will decide based on the 2001 articles on the state responsibility that decided by the International Law Commission. And Palestine needs to learn from the case of Bosnia. In the case of Bosnia did not ask for compensation, and then the court did not decide on the issue of compensation. But now Palestine has the opportunity, and last week I met with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Palestine, and I drew their attention to this aspect. And I think they are planning to ask not only for convicting Israel for committing genocide, but also to raise the issue of state responsibility, which include the issue of reparation and compensation. And then the issue of enforcement will come back again, and here Palestine can request other states, third states, to enforce the new decision of the International Court of Justice. But the mere fact that the court decided that this case is a plausible genocide case means a lot. Means that there are so many indications that genocide is taking place as it is now. And I think even if it takes several years, after maybe 4, 5, or even 10 years, the court will decide that there is genocide, because it is genocide. If this case is not genocide, then what will be genocide?
Thank you for your answer. We have another questions. Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation, Dr. Sami Arian and Dr. Qafisheh. I want to ask 2 questions. So we're talking about ICJ's verdict, so on and so far, but we do not know when political will come and so many things will be changed as we expect. But if I want to ask what would be the ultimate outcome that we expect, two-state solution or one state? Now we're talking about river to the sea, so on and so far. And when we say two-state solution, and it is maybe a real question, is it viable or not to establish two-state solution? If it is a proposal that one-state solution, as what Rashida Tlaib claims or proposes, what do you think? I want to ask. Secondly, do you think that Palestinians will fight together, taking decision independently for Palestinian cause? Thank you.
I didn't get the word.
Do you think that the Palestinians will fight against Israel or Zionist movements together for their own cause independently?
The question is about the political outcome of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Of course, there are 3 possibilities. Israel was always faced with 3 choices, 3 options. The Palestinians were struggling, always the weaker part, but they're determined to get their rights back. Israel had the option of either being a Jewish majority with 78% of the land that it stole and took in 1948. That would have meant the so-called two-state solution. They always claimed that there was no partner on the other side until Yasser Arafat and the PLO at the time, starting in 1988, ending in 1993 with the Oslo Accord, recognized the State of Israel on 78% of the stolen Palestinian land in exchange for 22% of so-called State of Palestine in the two-state solution. Israel did not go for it. Actually, it put every obstacle in order to prevent that, because it had a different notion. It doesn't want any kind of a Palestinian political entity, because as a settler colonial state, settler colonialist movement that is trying to fulfill its objective of bringing the Jews of the world into the whole state of Palestine, and if possibly even beyond, that would be thwarted. So it prevented that by building settlements. In 1993, the number of settlers in Palestine was 125,000. Today it's over 750,000. And it basically prevented any kind of a viable Palestinian state. So that's been gone. The other option would have been, okay, it will take all of Palestine, all 100% of it, including the West Bank and Gaza, but of course it has to give rights to everybody, which is the so-called one-state solution, in which case every Arab and every Israeli would have equal rights in one political system, in one entity. But to do that, that means they would lose their exceptionalism, their Jewish majority, and therefore it will no longer become Zionist state. It will become just a state of its own citizens. But of course, no Israeli would go for that, including, from the most left to the most right. Everybody's against it. They want it to stay as a Zionist state. as a Jewish majority state. So that's also a non-starter for them. They would never go for that. And they will do everything in their power to make sure that doesn't happen. So the third option that existed is that they will have all the territory, but they will deny the Palestinians any kind of political or legal rights, hoping that there will be a strategic time by which they can push as many Palestinians out of Palestine as possible. They think, the right-wingers, or at least the most extreme among them, that this is a right opportune time for Gaza, and they could be followed by the West Bank. You throw these people in Egypt, the others to Jordan, and then you can create a Jewish majority state on all of the land of Palestine. But the problem, of course, is that you have more Palestinians today in that part of the country, in the whole of Palestine, than you have Jews. So you end up with having an apartheid, an Israeli form of an apartheid state, where the world does not accept in today's world. That is unacceptable. I mean, they can live with it under this illusion that somehow it's going to come as a two-state solution. So to summarize, forget about the two-state solution. This is no longer viable, no longer coming. So when you have leaders of the world, particularly within the Arab and Muslim body politics, talking about a two-state solution, they are either deluding themselves or deceiving us. There is no two-state solution. That's gone. One-state solution, they will never go for it because that will be the end of Zionism. That answers your second question. Will the Palestinians continue to struggle until there is? And the answer is emphatically yes. We have seen this today in Gaza. You know, you have 4% of the people. 4% of there is no conflict where you would lose 4% of the people. You know, completely. Obviously, we can look back into the Second World War and all that. Millions of people died in a world war. But here we're talking about a very localized war where 4% of the people are willing to sacrifice for their rights. But on top of that, it's not only that, but you have almost 85, almost 90% of the people have been displaced, and they still refuse to surrender, and they will continue to struggle. So, but I want to just conclude by saying this struggle will not end. It's not, and I don't have time to go over it here, it's not an Israeli-Palestinian struggle. It's a struggle for the whole ummah, for all free people around the world. Because Zionism is a threat to everybody here. Don't be deluded. Zionism is a threat to you here in Turkey. They can never allow Turkey to be a powerful country because they would be afraid. They will never allow Turkey to be a truly independent country because they may turn against them. They will not allow Turkey to become a state of advanced science or advanced state of civilization. They will always try to fight you. But that's true also for all other countries in the neighborhood, in the region and beyond. So it's a threat to everybody, and we have seen what they are capable of doing. They are willing to kill as many people, to maim as many people, women, children, plants, animals, buildings, whatever it takes. This is a sick mentality, a sick movement, a movement, a racist, supremacist movement that the world cannot afford to have in today's world.
Thank you for your answer. Do we have any kind of questions? Actually, we have 5 minutes because prayer times come in.
If I can just have a comment on...
Okay, Professor Qafisheh.
You know, I just wanted to say that before October 7th, almost the question of Palestine and the issue of Palestine was forgotten by the international community. So although what we are witnessing now is horrible, but I think that brought to the question of Palestine and the issue of Palestine to the international community's attention. And now everybody is talking about two-state state solution. But as Dr. Arian said, you know, this would not be a viable solution. You know, I am talking to you from Jerusalem, and every day I drive from Jerusalem to the south of the West Bank in the city of Al-Khalil or Hebron. And settlers are all over the place. You know, every city, every village that I see in my way is under siege. So it's not only Gaza under blockade. So everybody actually is under siege. You know, the Israeli soldier, any Israeli soldier, Israeli settler can block the entire city, the entire community from moving, and they can virtually kill anybody that they want. So with the current situation, I think it's impossible to have a two-state solution. Then we have now the alternative will be maybe the one-state state solution. But in either case, there will be no real solution without an international intervention. We need always to remember that the question of Palestine, the problem of Palestine and Israel, is an internationally made problem. So it's made by the West, and it will not be solved without a genuine international intervention. And in that intervention, international law and justice should be in the heart of that solution. Without that, the conflict will continue for a very long time, could continue forever, and the Palestinians, like any other colonized people in the world, will not give up. So of course there might be certain periods of quiet and truce and ceasefire, but then because they are living under oppression, they will not give up. And I think the history tells us that fact in other parts of the world, and also in that particular case. So I think the international community needs to wake up, and probably the October 7th is a wake-up call for the international community that enough is enough, and there should be genuine international and regional intervention, including the intervention of Arab states, Turkey, and other states in the region, to be more proactive and play more proactive role in that case, because if there is no stability in Palestine, there will be no stability in the entire region, and probably no stability in the entire world.
Thank you for your answer. We have 3 questions, but we have not so much time. Sorry for that.
Just lump them all together.
Yeah. So take one last questions. You can ask. You want? I'm sorry for that.
Just give it to all three.
Okay. Bismillah. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Professor Sami, thank you very much. Good to see you long time after. My question is, you rightly pointed out regarding ICJ that it is not an executive, it does not have executive authority to implement its decision. It goes to the United Nations to implement it. UN has met over a dozen times since October 7 on Palestine. Every time the call for ceasefire was struck down. One is that. Second thing, it also happened after the Ukraine crisis, how the international systems worked so fast in case of Ukraine invasion by the Russia. Even there is arrest warrant against Russian President Vladimir Putin, which we did not see that way international systems work in case of Palestine. This so-called rule-based system, and may I recall that Professor Sami, you yourself, as a scholar activist with a long history of activism in United States, in fact, impressing upon people to use these systems in case of Palestine, starting from United States itself. Now, do we see curtains falling on this so-called rules-based system? One is that. Second thing, what do you say about the response to Palestine? When we see on the map how the governments have responded to it, I have not seen a Zionist government, despite the fact that it is a Labour Party ruling Australia, but has been resisting to call on Israel for a ceasefire. Now go to Latin America, Venezuela, Cuba, small Caribbean nation, Nicaragua, they have been quite open, calling on Israel that it is an apartheid state, that there should be, that Palestinians have a right to self-determination and freedom. So these states where you have the left-leaning parties ruling have always been despised by this rules, by those who promote the so-called rules-based system. But in case of Palestine, standing on the right side of the history. And all those, I mean, how do you see this response? I mean, the response of the governments as well. Is this a moment of reckoning for the Muslim states itself? wherein we were being told, or wherein activists and politicians would come study in the West and tell us about democracy. Thank you.
You can take this question and keep us, please. Yeah, at the middle of it.
Thank you. Professor, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm having a little bit out of topic question, so excuse my youngish question actually. As the people, as the Ummah, or as a nation, how can we manage our civil power to push our government to take real action actually? By the way, I'm one of your students, so I'm really wondering your roadmap. Because at the end of the day, when we go out from this room, we will still facing the facts that we see in everywhere, and we cannot do anything that it's really meaningful. But as you mentioned, there is a lot of to be done. So how can we do it as a students or as a civil power? Thank you.
One last question. Should I just speak?
Thank you to both speakers. My question is a short one. It's a legal question. I know it's not it's not a question in terms of, anyway, I'm just going to come to my question. So what else can we expect from the International Court of Justice in terms of provisional measures until a real decision is going to be made? Is there anything else, Professor, that we're missing, haven't spoken of since yet? Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Professor Qafisheh, could you answer a question if you want? You can choose whatever you want.
Yeah, maybe the last question regarding what we expect from the ICJ to do as part of provisional measures. As we know, South Africa now, yesterday, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of South Africa applied to the court in order to impose more provisional measures because Israel is not complying by the court order that decided on the 26th of January. The court asked the South Africa asked the court to impose, for example, clear obligations, including the issue of ceasefire, asking other states to take stronger, firmer actions against the genocidal acts that Israel is making or taking in Gaza Strip. I think the court has a wide range of power under its statute to take different actions, but until now it's not clear what the court is going to do, because in other cases, the case of Ukraine, Myanmar, Bosnia, and Croatia, there were only provisional measures, and that's it. But now I think with the South African pressure, the court might move to take maybe more specific measures against Israel. Particularly now, as we see, Nicaragua is trying also to file another case against the states who are complicit in the genocide in Gaza, particularly the UK, Germany, Canada, and I think Australia, not the United States, because the United States has reservations on the jurisdiction of the court with regard to the Genocide Convention, and that might also have another breakthrough, like put more pressure on these countries, because they will be charged in genocide. So I think every country in the world can do something. Maybe Turkey in particular. There was a question about Turkey. Turkey is a leading Islamic country. Probably it is the biggest with Saudi Arabia and Egypt. It can play a more active role within the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, which we see that this organization is completely liberalized. You know, they just met 2 months ago, and they made empty statements and declaration, and that's it. I think Turkey, by its big weight within that organization, could push the organization to take a stronger role, including maybe working with Egypt in order to open the Rafah crossing in order to have more access of humanitarian aid to Gaza. And as we also mentioned, that by the court order, states can by themselves unilaterally take actions in order to put an end to genocide. And they have the verdict of the court. They can take it by themselves and say, we have an obligation, not only the right, but also an obligation to take actions against this genocide. And I think if Israel and the United States and other Western powers see that there is a real will by these states to take action, I think that will have a stronger impact as more than the current situation.
Thank you for your answer. Please, Professor.
Yeah, these are two important questions. So I'll try to address them briefly, but they need really more elaboration to give them justice. Your insights into the international order, of course, are true. The United States, we're going through in the world order transition, particularly after the Ukraine war. We may end up in the next few years with two old orders, one that will be one American-led, one Chinese-led. We'll see what happens. Obviously, there is a lot happening in the background. The United States was trying to compete with China in a way that it can undermine the emergence of either a world order that will be more just and less American-led, or at least isolate China. That's been taking place. It wanted to, the US has three main areas that it cares about. This is one of them because of oil and Israel. And it was trying to create a regional order by which Israel would have normalization with Saudi Arabia. And then it will give them the task of protecting its interests in this region. October 7th came to undermine this plan. That's why they came with viciousness, trying to punish the Palestinian resistance against that. So whether that emerges or not remains to be seen, but certainly the people, or their governments rather, are trying, you know, Saudi Arabia in particular and Israel, they're trying to come back to that, but they cannot do it with this aggressiveness that's taking place, this aggression against the Palestinians. So meanwhile, what happened in Ukraine, what's happening in the South and East China Sea and in the East Asian, certainly we have reordering, and that will probably stay with us for the next few decades. Whether that's going to come with a real difference in the future, we'll see. BRICS is certainly coming to become an important bloc, even though some allies of the United States, you know, like the Emirates and the Saudis, they may undermine it a little bit. So there's a lot of uncertainty taking place. And also they have a lot of turmoil within the United States. If you have a Trump presidency, he may disrupt a lot of that. So that's also another uncertainty that remains to be seen. So we can't answer that with certainty what's going to happen, but certainly there's a lot going on that will determine. What's important is how do we react, not what how others. I mean, we can look at the different possibilities, the different permutations, this, that. But what about us? The problem is we in Global South, Muslim world, you mentioned some like Cuba, Venezuela, others. These are the outliers. These are not the real. But the ones who are there, so far, we really are not acting independently. There's a lot of foreign grip, foreign influence, foreign intervention, foreign will. So we as people, and that comes to that question, we need to recognize what our strategic imperative is, what our strategic goal is. Because we can't put all our resources in a goal that is not attainable, or a goal that is an illusion. A lot of people want to become prosperous. We would like to become the 16th economy, 15th economy, 10th economy. What we want to do this, do that. A lot of stuff going on there. But there's a price to be paid. If you're willing to pay that price, which will always come with the price of being less independent, less free, more being controlled, because this world is not roaming free. This world has someone who is managing it. If you value your independence and freedom, then at least 1 or 2 generations in that country, in that region, would have to struggle for it and pay a price for it, because they're not allowed it to become more free and more independent and more powerful. But if your goal is something else, then you have to pay with that. That's why today in the Muslim world, they cannot do much for Gaza, because they have different calculations. We come to the last question, how do we deal with that? Well, certainly there is a short term and long term. The short term, we want to stop the aggression, the genocide on Gaza. We want that today before tomorrow, or tomorrow before the day after tomorrow. You have to pressure your politicians. I mean, in Turkey, you have that ability. People in different parts of the world, they don't have that. Egyptians cannot go to their ruler and say, do this, do that. They will immediately be taken. Or other countries, the Gulf countries, they can certainly say that, but no one listens to them. They're not accountable. They're not elected. Turkey, it's a bit different. You have more freedom, more independence, more ability to say, more ability to do things. So the media is playing a role, but it's just a hands-off type. We need awareness among the Turkish people. A lot of people in Turkey here do not understand what's going on, what's at stake. They look at it either as, I would like to pray in Jerusalem one day. But what does that mean? It doesn't matter. Just as long as I can pray, who cares? But there's total disconnect between what's actually taking place there. So that's their thing. This is not about, or maybe they are affected by Palestinian suffering. They don't like what they're seeing. A lot of blood, a lot of children being killed. But that's not what the conflict is about. It's part of it, but not the whole thing. So we need a lot of awareness. We need a lot of people to know what's at stake here. Actually, the future of the region and the future of Turkey is at stake. Your future, your children's future, and your country's future is at stake. A lot of people don't see that. But there is a disconnect. But also, as I said, we need to talk about how you can make a difference. They said, what can we do? We can't do much. No, there's a lot to be done. And you can go to the experts that can give a whole list of things. It's just uncomfortable because there is a price associated with it. If you want to have whatever you want to have, F-35, or you want to have more trade, or this or that, or they reschedule your debts, and to you that's more important than saving few Palestinian lives. So what's your priority here? And who makes the decisions? Your politicians, your parliament, your MPs, the executive branch, and so on and so forth. So the more you involved as people who can talk to these, you got to do something. Do the minimum. I mean, there's a maximum and there's a minimum. I'm going to ask a question, and I want everybody to think about that. Who today is actually doing something on the ground to make a difference in this fight? Yemen? Iraq? Lebanon? Shia countries. Don't you feel ashamed? We're nothing against Shia, but they are the ones who are actually doing something on the ground to make a difference, to pressure the US, pressure Israel and others to do something. What about us? What about the Sunni world? Where are they? Are you telling me that nobody in the Sunni world can impact American policies, American interests, or Israel at all? Who's trading today with Israel? When it comes, a lot of people in that part of the world. You need to demand people in the positions of power to take daring decisions to make a difference. I'm not even asking them to go and use arms. We're way beyond that. Even though in Iraq they're using arms, they're hitting American interests. They are being killed. In Lebanon they're doing the same. In Yemen they're doing the same. I'm not even asking that for the Sunni world, but at least do something other than rhetoric, other than saying this is wrong, we condemn this, we denounce that, that's not right. We send aid, but we can't get it in. These are weak positions, unacceptable. Now that's the short term. On the long term, you need to start having stronger civil society movement towards the ultimate goal, which is the dismantlement of the Zionist nature of that regime. This is not about two-state solution. When your politicians tell you two-state solutions, you know that they are trying to not do anything. because that's just something that will never happen. So what we have to, I mean, I don't want this, actually the position of the people in power to do something against their interest, but at least have it in mind that this is not going to happen. So we as civil society people here, we need to start thinking in those terms. What is my role to dismantle the state? I have a whole paper on this. I don't have time to go over it here. But in that project, everybody has a role to play. Thanks.
Thank you so much. It was so powerful. We come to end of the conference. I would like to thank you all for your participation.